Okay. Then PE header is there, which contains the signature of the file. Then the optional header contains one important field called address of entry point. Okay, so it tells us at what address the entry point, the executable will start its execution. Then there are data directories which contains the import and export tables. So import and export table, they helps us find out what all APIs are being invoked by the binary. In the sections table, we have the .text section, .rdata section, .data section. So .text section is always it's always executable section. Okay, so it contains the executable code which is uh, executed when the binary is being run. Then finally, in the sections itself, we have a code section, we have an import section, and we have a data section. So code section, as I told, contains the executable code. Then there is import section. So import section contains the APIs which are used, which tells us that, okay, this binary is loading, for example, in this case, exit processor message box. So these two APIs are being loaded by the binary, and we can also see from which DLL these APIs belong. So DLL is your dynamically linked library. It is just like a shared object on Linux. It You can simply name it as a library. Okay, so we have two libraries here: kernel30.dll and user30.dll. Kernel30.dll is exporting this exit process API, which is used by the binary, and user30.dll is also exporting message box API, which is also used by the binary. And finally, we have the data. So all the strings in your binary are in the data section. So this is your loading process. We have the at first we have the DOS header is being passed, then PE header is passed, option header is passed, and then the section table is passed and loaded. Finally, the file is mapped in memory according to the image base size of headers and section table. And then the imports are passed. Finally, the execution of the binary happens. So this slide will be shared with you. So you can also go to this link later on and study the uh, P parsing in memory. Sections, as I told you, code section, data section. There are several different sections here. Then the PE file format. Now, why is PE header important? Because it contains all the important information required by the OS to execute the executable. Okay, so it contains information that specifies where the executable needs to be loaded in memory. Okay, so it contains information that where the executable will be loaded and from where it will start its execution. So there are 2 points, both are covered in the PE header. It also contains the libraries that the executable requires to be loaded. So in malware analysis, analyzing the PE header is important. So what information are we interested in? There could be a compiler timestamp which tells us when and where the malware was compiled. Then there could be sections. So whether the executable is packed or not. So packing and unpacking will come to that topic later. Then there could be libraries and imports. What libraries and imports are being used? What information do they give us about the functionality of the malware? Then what all strings are present in the binary? So PBR and PE Studio are both popular tools to analyze PE files. So I'll just show you a demo of PBR and PE Studio. Let me just power on my uh, Windows 7 virtual machine. Just a few seconds. Okay, there's some issue with the virtual machine. Okay, started. So this is a PE Studio. I have downloaded this tool, okay, on my Windows 7 virtual machine. I also have PE Bear here. You can see a bear sign. So this is also a PE analysis tool. So first I'll open PE Studio. Okay, so I've opened this PE Studio. What I'll do is I'll just open a sample executable with this PE Studio. So here I've opened lab3.exe. So you can see that PE Studio has several fields here. It has indicators, it has virus total analysis, and other PE header structure as well. So first, we'll come on to the indicators. What are indicators showing? That this file references strings. This file is code by virus total, file import symbol. So all these indicators are helping us to get to a conclusion that maybe this file is malicious. Okay, why? Because its virus total score is 41 out of 68. So virus total, if you don't know, is an online antivirus scanning service. So virus total has collection of almost 70 antiviruses. So whenever you submit a file there, an executable there, what it does is all those 70 antiviruses, they scan your executable and then they tell you a result that whether this executable is malicious or not. So in this case, it's telling us that 41 out of 68 antiviruses are detecting this file as malicious. Then it says that the file reference is a URL pattern. So the URL in this case is practicalmalwareanalysis.com cc.htm. So that URL is practicalmalwareanalysis.com and the page it is trying to load is cc.htm. Now we come on to the DOS header. So DOS header is telling us several important fields like hashes, MD5 hash, SHA1 hash, SHA256 hash. It's also telling us the entropy of the file. Then there is your DOS stub. Then we come on to the file header, which contains an important field called signature. Okay. Signature of the file is specifying that this file is PE00 file. Okay. Then there is option header, and in the option header, there is one important field It's called entry point. Okay, so entry point in this case is a relative virtual address. In this case, it's 12A2. 12A2 is in hex. So it is telling us that the file will start its execution from the relative address 12A2. Then there are directories. Okay. Now we come on to the libraries. Okay, so which libraries are loaded by this particular binary? So in this case, we can see that there are three libraries: kernel32.dll, wininet.dll, and advapi.32.dll. It is also telling us the imports. So in this case, there are 54 imports. Some are belonging to wininet.dll, some are from kernel32.dll, and then there are some which are from advapi.dll. Okay. So there are some APIs which are highlighted in red. So they are telling us that these APIs might be blacklisted and are used for network activity, because you can see they are placed in the network group. All these APIs are placed in the network group, telling us that maybe this file is trying to do something over the network. And we saw URL before, so maybe it's trying to visit that URL, download the page called cc.htm. Okay, so maybe the binary is trying to do these things. Finally, we have strings. So important strings here are, one is a URL pattern, okay, practicalmalanalysis.com. Then there are some other registry details as well. So this particular registry key, maybe it's used because some programs, they try to install a registry entry at this particular place, software backslash Microsoft Windows current version and run. So maybe the binary is trying to make itself as a auto run file. So auto run or auto start files, executables, they start when the Windows OS starts boots up. So this was the information in the PE Studio. Now we'll see the same information in PEBear. So what we'll do is we'll take the same file and we'll open it with PEBear. So PEBear tells us the same information: DOS header, DOS stub, anti header. In anti header, there is signature, file header, and optional header. Optional header is telling us the entry point. See, here is the entry point, same entry point, 1282. Then there are section headers. It's a nice visual representation as well. You can see the first part is the .text section, then there is .rdata section, and then .data section. Then there are finally imports. So you click on any DLL, it shows us what APIs are present in that DLL. Okay, so this was the information of a binary when analyzed in PEBear. Now we come on to x86 architecture and assembly. So x86 architecture is useful while analyzing a malware, because both in case of static analysis and dynamic analysis, you might come across the disassembly of the malware. So disassembly is basically when the opcodes are converted to assembly language. Okay, so it's essential because in disassembly, you might want to get an idea that how the malware is behaving. Okay, so in that case, disassembly is very helpful. So in x86 architecture, there are registers, stack, and CPU privilege modes. So the disassembly that you see of the malware, that is usually in x86 architecture. Okay, so the architecture of that assembly is x86. There are some other architectures as well. For example, there is an ARM architecture, but it's not used when we study about malwares. So x86 architecture, it was designed by Intel during 1978. It is of type CISC, which is complex instruction set computer. It has features like multitasking, protected memory model with paging and segmentation, and it runs on all the 16-bit, 32-bit, and 64-bit platforms. So here are the registers in the x86 architecture from EX, EBX all the way to ESP and EBP. Then there are segment registers, CS, DS till GS. Then there is instruction pointer register. So instruction pointer register is your EIP. EIP always points to the instruction which is going to execute next. So when you are doing a dynamic analysis under debugger, you will often see that the EIP or the instruction pointer always points to the instruction which will be executed next. Then there are control registers which are not really common in the field of manual analysis. Here are the registers with their uses. So EX is used for as an accumulator register, which is used for storing operands and result data. EBX is your base register. Then there is ECX, EDX. So ECX is used when you are doing loop operations. So let's say your binary has a for loop or a while loop, then there is a heavy chance that the compiler has inserted ECX instruction in the disassembly in the place where the loop operation take place. Maybe the compiler has inserted ECX instructions. Okay. Then there is your EDX instruction, or ESI and EDI instructions. Okay. Then ESP always points to the top of the stack. So ESP is your stack pointer register, which always points to the top of the stack. Finally, we have your stack data pointer register, which always points to the frame of the currently executed instruction. So the base of the currently executing function, EVP always points to that base. So in 64-bit, the letter E is replaced by letter R. Okay, so instead of EX, EBX, ECX, we have RX, RBX, RCX, and so on. There are some other additional registers provided by 64-bit x86 architecture as well, like R8, R9, R10, all the way to R15. Now we come on to CPU privilege protection levels. So about this, you need to remember that malware such as rootkit will always run in ring 0 kernel mode, whereas your traditional malware will always run in ring 3 mode, which is application. So ring 0 is the most privileged and ring 3 is your least privileged mode. Okay. Then there are common instruction in assembly like push, pop, move, LEA, call. So your call and return instruction are used whenever there is a function call. Okay, so in that case, call instruction will be used. Then there are add, sub, and multiplication instructions. So they are used for whenever there is an arithmetic operation taking place. So add, sub, and multiplication instructions are used. Then for logical operations, and, XOR, and NOT are used. Whenever there is a comparison, in that case, CMP and test instructions are used. So this is your usual call stack. So what happens on the left, we have the stack, and on the right, we have a disassembly of a function. So one by one, we'll just execute an instruction in our head and then see what happens on the stack. So on the right, we have push 0x00 and push 0xFF. So these two numbers 0 and 255. So in hex it is 250 0xFF. In decimal it is 255. So first they are pushed. So what happens is on the stack base is at the top and stack top is at the bottom. Okay, so first 0x0 will be pushed and 0xFF will be pushed. Then when the CPU sees a call sub function, then what it does is it places the return address, which is the address which comes right after the call function. It will take the return address and it will push it on the stack. After that, the CPU calls the sub function. The sub function does its necessary computation, whatever computation happens in that function. After that, leave and return are called. So leave instruction, what it does it simply pops the arguments which were pushed on the stack. So we push 0x00 and 0xFF, right? So leave will pop those two numbers of the stack. And then finally, there is a return instruction. Return instruction, what it does is it takes the return address and it jumps to the return address. Okay. So that is how the execution resumes right after the call sub function. This is your program layout in memory. So we have the stack, heap, and several sections here. So stack is used for storing function arguments and local variables. Heap is a dynamic memory. So whenever you have a function like malloc or calloc, in that case, heap will be used. Then there is uninitialized data and initialized data. And then finally, there is a program code. So I'll just show you the demo of a simple program under GDB and proc. So here I have logged in to a Debian machine via SSH. So what I'll do is I'll take this program add.c. It's a very simple program. It's simply taking two integers and doing their addition. So we run this. So we enter two integers, 1 and 2, and we get the answer is 3. Now what we do is we take the add program and run it under GDB. So as soon as we type start, what happens is we are greeted with a very nice visual representation of the program in memory. So at the very top, we have the registers here. Then we have the disassembly window. So in registers from EX till EIP, you can see that there are registers. EIP, as I already told you, it always points to the instruction which will be executed next. In this case, it is pointing to 5561E6, which is this instruction. Then we have the source code. Okay, so in this case, we are able to see the source code, but traditional malwares, we won't be able to see the source code. Then finally, we have the stack. Stack, as I told, ESP always points to the top of the stack and EBP points to the current functions base. Now, as soon as we type VM map, what happens is we are able to see the entire visual representation of the program. So at the top, we can see that in the top of the memory, we have the add program with its various sections. So each row here is a section, okay? And the last column tells us just the name of a program or DLL which is loaded. Okay, so this we can see that this add program is loading this libc.so, ld.so. So these libraries are being loaded by this add program. That was the demo of GDB. Now we can see the same thing without using GDB as well. So what we do is simply run the program and then we find out the process ID or the PID of this particular program. So we get the PID as 12358. So what we'll do is simply we'll inspect the proc tables. So proc tables are there on Linux, which are used to inspect a particular running program. So when we type this proc, the PID and then maps, we're able to see the same layout which we saw in GDB. But here we are also able to see the heap and then there is a stack. The libraries are of course there and the add program is there. Okay. So that was the demo of GDB and proc maps. We can see the same process memory map in Windows 7 as well. Okay, let it start in the background and we'll do some other, we'll go through the slides now. So this is our GDB view as I showed you before. Then there is a process address space. So every process is laid out in the same virtual memory space, regardless of the actual physical memory location. So every process feels that it is in the system alone and enjoys all the memory that no other process exists. So what happens is in Windows, we have a concept of virtual memory. Okay, so virtual memory enables a program to load itself in the memory without worrying about other programs. Okay, so a process when it's loaded in the memory always thinks that it is the only process which is being loaded. But in the background, what happens is every address, every reference to an address is always converted from virtual address to physical address. Okay, so that's all you need to remember. And then OS and CPU together help maintain this abstraction. Okay. Now what I'll do is I'll show you how a process memory map looks like in a Windows debugger. So here I have downloaded x64.dbg using Chocolatey tool, which is a package manager of Windows, as I told you before. And what I'll do is I'll open the same lab here as well. So what I do is I open this same lab with a debugger here. As soon as I click on start, I'm able to see on the very top right, we have the registers from EX to till EIP. EIP, as I told you, always points to the instruction which will be going to execute next. Okay, so in this case, it is pointing to 401282. If you remember, in PE Studio and PEBR, we saw the entry point as 1282, right? That was the relative entry point. This is their absolute entry point because it is also taking the base as well. So here we have the stack. Okay, ESP always points to the top of the stack. So ESP, as you can see here, is 12FF8C, and it is pointing to the top of the stack. Here also we are able to see the memory map. So if we the view menu, we are able to see the memory map here. So we can see that we have the program which is lab60.exe and several DLLs which are loaded. Here is the kernel32.dll. Okay, other DLLs as well. Here is a win9.dll. So that was the memory map of a program which is executing on Windows under a debugger. Now we come on to packer or cryptor. So a packer is used by a malware author because maybe he wants the program to get smaller, okay, or he wants to hinder the analysis of his malware. Okay, so packer or cryptor is used in that case. So packed executables, what they are is packers compress or encrypt the executables, and malware authors often protect executables with packers. Why? Because they want to make it more difficult to analyze, and also they want to decrease the size of the binary. One important thing about packers is the packed program is always unpacked in memory at runtime. Okay, so this is your packer structure. At the left, we have the file before being packed, and on the right, we have the file after being packed. So one difference you can see here, the image section, the entire code in the image section got replaced by a packed section and an unpacking section. Okay, so there is now a code which is packed, and then there is now a code which is called the unpacking code. So what happens is the role of the unpacking section is to take the packed section and unpack it in memory. Okay, so this is what happens after a file is unpacked in memory. Okay, so the unpacking section has unpacked the packed code in the memory of the executable. Okay, the common examples of packers are UPX, VM Protect, and there are some other online packers as well. Here are the functional components of a packer. We have the encryption encoding algorithm, then there is a decryption engine, then there is a protection engine. In the protection engine, we have a code obfuscator, we have anti-debugger, anti-virtual machine, and anti-decompilation. So all these protection strategies are used by the malware authors while packing the code. Okay, so while packing the code, they ensure that, okay, if they use these tricks, then it will become harder for the antivirus engineer or the malware analyst to analyze the binary. These are the packers: UPX, ASPAC, Armadillo, Thamidan, VM Protect. So they are placed in the increasing order of difficulty. So UPX is a very easy packer. It's very easy to unpack, and then VM Protect is the hardest to unpack. So I'll show you the demo of UPX. So UPX also I've downloaded with the tool Chocolatey. Okay, so what I do is I simply type UPX and the name of the file that I want to compress. So in this case, we take a file lab6 to compress me.exe. So as soon as we type enter, we are able to see that UPX has packed this file. Okay, so the file size from 40960 bytes, it has decreased to 16384 bytes. The compression ratio is 40%. And you can see the same thing reflected while we click on the properties of the file. So when we click on the properties of the file, we can see that size is now 16 KB. Earlier it was 40 KB. Now what happens is, let's say we try to open this particular packed file in a PE analysis tool. So I have opened this file. Now, as you can see, the sections have been replaced. So now there is no .text .data section. Now there is UPX0, UPX1 section. Even the entry point has changed now. Why this has happened is because the file is packed now. Okay, so the file won't execute at its original entry point. It will execute at the packer's entry point. Okay, so wherever the unpacking section is, the file will execute there. And from there, the unpacking section will execute. What that unpacking section will do is it will take the pack section in memory and it will convert it into unpacking section and then finally jump to that unpacking section. Okay, so that's the demo of UPX. The unpacking is very easy here. So you can simply give a -d switch and the name of the file which you packed earlier. So as soon as we do that, we can see that the file is restored from 16384 bytes to 40960 bytes. This was very easy because UPX is a very common packer. So the UPX authors themselves, they provide this functionality to decompress the file. Okay. But some advanced packers are there. It's not very easy to unpack the file. In that case, you will need to take the help of a debugger to unpack a file. Okay, so that was the demo of packers. Now there are some online antivirus and sandboxes as well. So VirusTotal, I already told you, I explained you about it. It is a multi-engine virus scanner. Then there is always Kaspersky Threat Intelligence Portal and other URLs as well. This URL any.run, it has the feature to take any executable and run it there, and you will be able to see live the execution of that executable. Okay. So that was so whenever you want that you are not very confident on analysis and you want to see what happens while we perform an online antivirus analysis. So you want to see that what other antiviruses have their opinion about the particular exe. In that case you take help of online antiviruses. Okay, so these are some books if you want to get started with reverse engineering malware. First is reversing secrets of reverse engineering, and then there is practical malware analysis. Okay, so if you have any questions, you can ask. Else we'll close the session. Okay, so I'll be closing the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vivek. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks.